Brock, thank you so much for being here. I've long admired your work, especially in the past couple of years. Your pieces on The New Right and the West Village Girls was famously a favorite of mine. And you just wrote a great cover story for New York Magazine about something I've been talking and writing about for a while, which is line culture in New York City, titled It's Humiliating, It's Exhilarating, It's a Line. And you've clearly been covering youth and nightlife culture in New York City for years. From your perspective, when did lines stop being something that people just tolerated and started being something that they actually were actively seeking out?
It really feels to me like last summer is when things started to really pick up. I mean, thinking very broadly about youth culture in the city, like coming out of the pandemic, like there was such an explosion of like young people hanging out and doing new things, right? Like we were all talking about Times Square, and I had a nightlife column at the time, and everybody was going out, and it felt like everybody was doing ketamine and going to the rave. And then I feel like we got just the right amount of years away from the pandemic. And over the last two summers, I feel like things started to change, and the youth culture started like gravitating more towards influencer culture. Not that that didn't exist already, but it did. It felt like that started to be the predominant like way we thought about young people in Gen Z in New York. So I think last summer is really the first time I started noticing the lines. Um, I was writing my piece about the West Village Girls, and obviously all of them were standing in line for Swedish candy at the time. And then this summer, it just felt like it got so much more intense. I live in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and even in my neighborhood, which when I moved here, let's say 6 years ago, felt like a quiet, kind of Tony waterside neighborhood, all of a sudden there were lines everywhere. I live on very close to Radio Bakery, and like there was a line there every morning. And then of course the West Village just got even more intense. So yeah, it feels like something that's been happening in the last year, but really increased in intensity this summer.
Totally. And from my perspective, I think there's a social aspect to this of people wanting to be around other people, wanting to be where the people are. We're in this moment where post Knicks victory, New York City World Cup is really popping off. To what extent do you think there's a social aspect to the line waiting culture, and how does that fit into this narrative of summer 2026 in New York City?
Yeah, I feel like when I started on this story, I had read a few pieces and seen a few comments online kind of suggesting that the kind of interest in line waiting had something to do with a third space or people getting to spend time with each other. And I will say two things. First of all, when I was doing this reporting and just waiting in lines, I was sort of surprised at how many people were waiting alone. I mean, I think I would say it was like 50-50 of people waiting with friends and then people waiting alone.
Hmm.
I don't know if I quite buy into the fact that it's like people are doing it to interact with their community. I write in the piece like if a froyo line is becoming a third space, that just feels totally depressing to me. It feels like we've gone somewhere wrong as a culture if that's where we have to go to like meet and hang out with people. At the same time, so many of the people I talked to were there with friends. They were, on a date, or I talked to a group of girls that work together and they have a weekly book club and they decided to go get dessert after the book club. But, I don't think any of them really were thinking about it as a deep community exercise. I think they were just spending time with friends, best not to overthink it. I think to some extent it's about community, but I don't think it's about community as much as some people want it to be. You know what it reminds me of? There's something quite innocent about it. It's like when I was in high school and I couldn't drink yet. And so
Hmm.
the only thing to do with friends in your spare time was I'm from Tennessee, so in our case, like go to Sonic or go hang out in a parking lot with our Sonic drinks. Like it feels like that, like kind of just an innocent non-alcoholic way to spend time with friends.
Yeah, I will say, personally, having waited on the Mimi's line quite a few times by myself, like that is a time when I've talked to the people in front of me and behind me. I didn't necessarily go there. I went there to get the froyo. I didn't go there to wait in the line. However, I did talk to the people, and like I am not necessarily always, picking up a conversation with someone. And the other thing that I think is interesting about this too is like our Gen Z is used to instant gratification. You can literally have froyo delivered to your apartment in 5 minutes from Pinkberry. So why is it that people are going and waiting in line at Mimi's or Culture or any of these places and Mika, Birdies, and not either going to Pinkberry, which has no line,
Mhm.
or ordering it directly to their apartment?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's something very conducive about the lines to conversation, right? Because you're waiting and you're wondering how long it's going to be and you're wondering if it's worth it. I feel like that is a conversation starter I mean, I was having to ask people these questions because I was writing a story about it, but I think naturally people were starting conversations with each other by just being like, "Hey, how long have you been waiting?" And that like gets people talking. And to your
Hmm.
point, yeah, I just think part of the reason I think I came out so defensive of the line people was, yes, everything is instant gratification. And I like sit in my house and order Uber Eats once or twice a week.
Hmm.
This is a way to not do that. Like I have
Right.
everything Amazon to my house. And so I feel like there's something commendable about leaving your apartment and like doing something for 30 minutes. Almost all, like so many people I spoke to, I would say, what brought you out today? And the answers were often like as simple as, well, I had nothing better to do. And I just kept being like, so true. Like, yeah, like you got out of the house. Like, yeah, I don't feel judgment. Like, I don't know how people could be judgmental of other people just wanting to get out of their house. I
Right.
also think there's something about all of this, the way that TikTok has affected the city.
Hmm.
TikTok has allowed all of us to kind of be tourists of our own city. Every night I look at TikTok in bed and I'm seeing things that are in my neighborhood. I learned of a restaurant opening in my neighborhood because of TikTok this week, and I might not have noticed it for months, just walking past it. But because of the internet, yeah, it like encourages us to get out and be tourists in our own city or something, which I think is kind of fun.
Totally. So that actually brings me to something I was planning to ask you next, which is that in the piece you cite a quote from June of 1981. What's the through line between that era's line culture and this one? And do you think that what's happening is something new, or it's just the same thing that's always happened but with a new TikTok flavor to it?
I think, well, this piece from 1981 in New York Magazine, which is so great, which is about line culture, it's really funny to go back and read it because, I mean, it's just a completely different era of the city, and you see how charmed our lives are now because the writer is talking about lines, but he's talking about it's the 80s, and I think there was a sense that the city was overcrowded. And so he's talking about waiting in line at the bank, waiting in line at the post office, waiting in line to get through the Holland Tunnel. And now the things that we wait on are these kind of frivolous, like small luxuries. I do think that the connection for me was thinking about some of the lines that the magazine has covered in the last 20 years. People waiting on tickets for Hamilton, people waiting at Magnolia Bakery, people waiting especially for the Cronut in
Hmm.
2014. I think that the line culture now is very similar to what was happening with the Cronut, except for the fact that it is all amplified a thousandfold. Dominic Ansel told me, it blew up because he uploaded a grainy iPhone photo of the cronut to the internet, and then a blogger wrote about it on his blog, and then the next morning 150 people showed up. But can you imagine today? I mean, it's that times 1,000, right? You put it on TikTok and 100,000 people see it, and thousands of people show up.
Yeah, so it's just amplified.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you also talk about herd mentality that people basically someone from in line for Mika said, they caught themselves with this
Mm.
herd mentality. Did you find that most people were self-aware about being manufactured, maybe from TikTok, from their For You page, into a line, or were people sort of in denial about it? What were their reasoning for why they were in the line?
People knew that they were kind of joining the masses in
Hmm.
standing in these lines. People were very self-aware about that. And in fact, a lot of times when I was talking to people, they would kind of distance themselves. It's like they didn't want to be known as one of the line people. So they would say, "Oh, my friend is visiting town. Here's my friend. They're from out of town. That's the only reason that I'm here."
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. It like, or they would say things like, oh, my friend's visiting, or they would say, oh, I don't usually do this, or everybody was making excuses for why they were there. But also, I don't know if I really think that there's anything wrong about this herd mentality. When I was writing about the West Village girls last year, I did, there was something a little bit queasy or uncomfortable to me about the ways in which they kind of fetishized homogeneity. They kind of wanted to look like each other. Um, they wanted to go to the same places as one another. They were all trying to fit this very specific type, which I found, again, a bit disturbing. In this case, I don't know if I felt that. Like, people would talk as if they were like detectives or sleuths. Like, of course, if you've seen something 1,000 times on your iPhone, it's not so much that you're doing what everybody else is doing. A lot of people were going to try to form their own opinion. Like, they wanted
Yeah.
to decide for themselves if it was
Right.
worth it. So, yeah, and that's like a human instinct. And like, I don't know. Yeah, of course people want to do that.
Do you think people were resentful if they went and there wasn't a line? I think it's so great when I can go to Mimi's and there's no line. I live near there. I can just go in the middle of the day and like get it and save it for later. But do you think that people actually are craving the experience of being in the line?
I don't think people are craving the experience of being in a line. I do think it's kind of a nice time killer. Again, people would say things to me like, oh, I'm just not ready to go home. And like, I don't want to go sit at a bar or like pay $70 for dinner right now. So it's a nice way to kill time with your friends. But I don't know if anybody was looking for it. In fact, I think a lot of people are kind of looking for ways to cheat the line. A lot of
Hmm.
people, well, in my example personally, I'm in Greenpoint, so all these places with lines, like I know what times a day they're not busy, and so I purposefully go at those times.
Me
And I
too.
think a lot of people are doing that. I mean, Radio Bakery, if I see that there's not a line, I will just go in and buy something, even if I'm not hungry, and save it for later. It just feels like a small miracle. Like, oh, there's not a line today, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go
Yeah,
right now.
I do that too. You brought up another point about, they maybe don't want to pay $70 for dinner, but a lot of these places, the fry is pretty expensive, or the sweet treat or whatever it is. It's relatively expensive compared to the same version that you could get at the supermarket. So I'm curious, at a time when economic anxiety is really high, when the New York mayor just won a campaign running on the fact that the city's unaffordable, how do you square that circle? Like, why are people willing to spend this type of money on these these treats?
I think, yeah, some of the stuff is expensive. A $9.50 PB&J croissant. I think I paid $14 the last time I went to Mika, and that was with one little serving of soft serve and I think one or two toppings. However, I think that that is just the reality of what things cost in New York right now. And at the end of the day, my $14 yogurt is cheaper than pretty much every cocktail I've had in the last 2 years. It's cheaper than any lunch I could buy, even at Chopped, where I get my salads during the work week.
Right.
And
Now you have to be careful of that too, the
yeah,
salad
I
situation.
and I think, yeah, it's a small luxury. I don't know if I necessarily buy this, but one bakery owner said to me, in comparison to dinner, this is actually the kind of cheaper version. Like, you're treating yourself to something, but in the grand scheme of New York prices at the moment, this is the kind of affordable thing to do. It also reminds me of that statistic that gets thrown around, like the lipstick effect in
Mhm.
fashion, which
Mhm.
is, when there's times of economic anxiety, people spend their money on small goods. They don't buy the Chanel like jacket, they buy the Chanel lipstick, which costs $70. So I think that there's some level of that happening here.
Yeah. Okay, I know you kind of got at this in the piece, but from
And
your
these are
point of
kids with a ton of disposable income. Like, I don't know, these are like well-to-do New York City kids, right? Like, everybody works in tech and marketing and is making fine money.
Okay, I know you got at this in the piece, but from your point of view, what lines are worth it and what would you wait in line for?
It's funny because that SNL skit, the big dumb line that came out last year, the kind of joke of it is that you get to the end of the line and you get a shitty dollar slice of pizza. I think one interesting thing that's happening about in terms of the places I was writing about is all of it's pretty great. Like these are small businesses, all kind of like artisanal items. We also, I think, I didn't really discuss this in the piece, but you see plenty of pop-ups on the weekends in like a neighborhood like Soho where
Mhm.
people are standing around waiting for a long time for free shit. And it's usually, just something awful. Like, but in these cases, I think it's all pretty great. I think Cafe Pan is delicious. Again, I live near Radio Bakery. I go all the time. The industry is great. I can't really get on board with most of the trendy bagel places because I'd rather just go to Tompkins Square, where there's also usually a line. I don't know. I think it's all kind of worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Okay.
yogurt, the yogurt is the most mystifying because, again, like how good can froyo be? But I have to say, I had Mika. It was pretty damn delicious. I hate to like support this chain, like be too um, excited about this chain of frozen yogurt, but it's really good.
Yeah, I'm all in on the Froyo train. It's okay. But I will defend myself in saying that I always have been. Like I feel like Froyo for me never went out of style. It was always just like since I was, I don't know, in middle school, it was just that's my thing. Um, but yeah. If you had to bet, what's the next thing that New York City will line up for that hasn't been clocked yet?
Ooh, that's a really good one. It's funny, we've hit so many of the basic. It's funny, like how so many of these things are like, again, the critique that people make is that they're things that you can get anywhere in New York or things that New York is known for. So I feel like we've done the pizza and we've done the bagels and the like weird Frankenstein only can get it in New York pastries. I wonder if the lines will get slightly more luxurious. Like a new lobster roll place just opened in Greenpoint, and they're selling like trendy. It was a pop up. A lot of these places I wrote about also were pop ups at one time that turned into brick and mortars. There was a pop up that has turned into a brick and mortar. They're selling lobster rolls with a full pound of lobster topped with caviar and uni.
Oh my
Of
God.
course, you can't see the prices online, but it just opened like last week, and it did kind of make me think. I wonder if we'll start getting slightly more upscale versions of these things. I walked past uh, the Mark Hotel. Is it the
Yep.
Mark or the Carlisle recently? One of them, and they were doing kind of luxury caviar topped hot dogs out on
Yeah,
the
they have their hot dog stand outside.
yeah. And so I kind of wonder if this is something creeping up.
Okay, well, stay
What I
tuned.
wish is that it was pandemic times and we were all lining up for to-go cocktails to take to the park. That I would be all in on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brock. I really appreciate it. I always love reading your pieces, so I'll be excited to see what's next.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.